And that's again I'm not suggesting that our podcast has turned formulaic, but it is something that we really do need to reinforce. Hello and welcome to episode 271 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast, a proud member of the Marketing Podcast Network. Hope you're well and you are staying as sane as you feel you need to be. I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm not a rock star, but I am a CMO. And on this podcast, I chat with a band of marketing chums who share their marketing street knowledge, which I hope will bring out the rockstar marketer in you. This week, marketing strategist and former Forrester research director Jeff Clark and I chat about the soft stuff that is the hard stuff in marketing technology and the change that is required. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back. After this word.
We'll be right back.
After this word. We'll be right.
Raise the rudder! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
Choosing a bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drink that's all flavor and just 100 calories? Easy. Choosing between creamy vanilla, double chocolate, and sea salt caramel flavors? A little harder. Try the delicious new Starbucks Frappuccino light drinks. Look for them wherever you buy groceries. Start with Starbucks coffee.
Ian, welcome to the Rockstar CMO studio.
Thank you, mate. How are you?
I am doing well, and as you, I think as I've last reported a few times, it's been this nice spring weather, and so looking forward to having a nice discussion, and then getting out in the sun.
We're positively having a heat wave here. I mean, it's ridiculous. I think we're going to get some thunderstorms today, but it is like. It's like when you have like the August thunderstorms. Well, I mean, I know it's different up there in the north, and because you get the humidity and the heat, and then you get the real good rain. But here we're going through. It's very strange. I was on a call this morning, and people are a bit nervous that we're having such a great spring that means we're going to have.
What's that mean for summer? Yeah,
summer. Yeah.
Well, my son was just finished a trip in Western Ireland. Went to Galway, and they had 6 straight days, sunny, warm weather, and he was like, absolutely aghast.
Yeah, it's like Robert Rose, chatting to him last week. He'd just come back from Scotland. He was in Scotland for best part of a week, and it didn't rain then either.
Oh my God.
He's shocked. Anybody traveling to the UK at the moment must think, well, this is a nice place.
What is
it? What's all this stuff I hear about the grim weather? It's lovely.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in London a couple of weeks ago down in Covent Garden, and honestly think it was August with the tourists out, everybody sitting outside. It was gorgeous. But yes, so that's the weather report. Basically, it's going really well.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm reading a new book as well. I could sit outside and read. I've got this book called 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. We don't usually talk about books, but it's quite a good book.
We usually don't talk about books unless they're like one of yours.
All right, let's get the show on the road. So, and we're going to go, and this is when we have a conversation before we started about realizing how long we've been doing this bloody thing for, because we're going to return to a theme we last covered in episode 118. And you think to yourself, oh my God, we shouldn't be repeating themes. And you realize that was almost 3 years ago. And it's about the softer side of implementing marketing technology. And that the soft stuff is often the hard stuff. And the reason why I thought we'd talk about it, and I think it was you that reminded me that we talked about it before, is I actually happened across an article that you'd written back in your Forrester days. And it still seemed, fresh and relevant today, as much of what you talked about then still does today. And as if destined to appear on a podcast called Rockstar CMO, you open that article with a riff about how it's a bit like guitar playing. What say you, Jeff?
I love that. A riff about guitar playing.
See what I did there?
And as I reminded you that when we wrapped up that episode, I actually did play guitar.
Yeah.
So if anyone's interested in this topic, don't go back to that episode. Listen to this episode. So, the topic and the blog that I did on Forrester.com came out of a presentation I did at a conference that I believe no longer happened, that we called TechX. And so a colleague of mine and I did this presentation on the soft stuff is the hard stuff when it comes to marketing technology.
Mm-hmm.
And, as you were talking about the guitar riff, as a guitar player myself, I know that sometimes playing soft music like smooth jazz or classical, with kind of the subtle differences in tones and melodies and harmonies is a lot harder than playing, high volume, gritty rock and roll. And so, professional musicians know they have to be good at both the hard stuff and the good stuff and the soft stuff to get gigs. Cause, you never know what direction that, if you're a studio or you're on the road musician, you never know what direction your lead act is going to go in. And just for definition purposes, from a marketing tech perspective, where the soft stuff we're going to be talking about is in contrast is what I was framing as the hard stuff, which is like the techie part, understanding technical requirements, comparing product features and functions, running tests, doing pilots, all those things that those of us who've been attracted to technology is like, okay, yeah, I can do this. I can, I can put the headphones on and run the computer through the application through its paces. So, so anyway, we're going to be talking about the other aspects of marketing technology,
the soft stuff, the delicate soft stuff that's harder. I am curious though, because since episode 118, as we discussed, you are now in a band. So what does your band do, the hard stuff or the soft stuff? Or bit
we're mostly soft stuff. It's, a couple of vocalists and bass and a violin. So it's, when there's no drums, there's nothing to kind of help ratchet up the volume and the tempo.
I'm curious with the violin. Anyway, so let's get back onto this. We keep wandering off the topic of marketing. And this is going to be one of those episodes where I just tee you up for the 5 effing things. Because again, it's one of those topics that you're clearly well versed in and the subject matter expert.
And I came up with these 5 things before your editorial policy was etched in stone.
I was just about to say that, Jay. That's not fair. Amazing that you were at Forrester or Serious Decisions and you were following the Rockstar CMO editorial policy even then. That's amazing. So and playing the guitar. So what's your first one?
First one is identifying business needs. So when you're planning to acquire a new system or you're enhancing an old one, the tech team has to engage the stakeholders, at various levels to identify, what are the execution gaps. So, when I used to do a lot of, tech assessments, it's like, okay, interview all the people that are the primary people involved in the, using the technology and kind of build a solid set of business requirements. And the emphasis is business requirements, not technical requirements, because you're trying to build a business case for the new investment with a clear understanding of, what's the objective of the group that is looking at the new technology and what are the gaps across the people, process, technology, data. And that's what we would do is we build a table and it's like, okay, here's the problem, and here's the problem as it's expressed in people, process, technology, data. Okay, what's the business case for fixing this? And the important thing about this is that if you skip this step, getting approvals gets to be more difficult because you're kind of lacking the stakeholders' support And then you may also be misaligned with sort of higher level business objectives, because that's the other thing. These business needs should kind of roll up to, what's the company trying to accomplish? Therefore, what's marketing trying to accomplish? And technology as a gap to accomplishing that marketing goal. So, we want to make sure there's good alignment up the chain for this new or enhanced system.
Yeah. So this is the soft stuff of requirements, as you were saying. The hard stuff is the technical, and it's really easy to sort of post-rationalize and say, well, I need this feature function technical requirement. How do I express that in business need? Whereas actually you're really trying to figure out. But I mean, it did, when I saw this was our number one point, right? It did remind me of a line from the White Stripes, Fell in Love with a Girl, that we've said it once before, but it bears repeating, because we do talk about identifying business need as step one of a lot of
almost everything we talk about. Yeah.
But I think that it is so fundamental for the success of marketing technology, and any B2B purchase is the requirements, and it's the requirements, not in it needs to do this feature function, the button needs to be here, or it needs to be easy to use. This is going to solve this problem, right?
Yes,
so I think
we're lacking productivity here. We need to get more business here. Yeah. Okay, that relies on certain techniques and certain technology.
Yeah, and in fact, at this stage where you're identifying business needs, it shouldn't mention the technology almost at all, should it?
Except understanding what the current technology is. It's like, so when you're trying to execute this particular thing, what are you using and what's the problem there?
Yeah. Which sort of takes us to gap analysis, which I guess is the hard thing, but we'll get to that. So,
which is the other thing we talk about in almost.
We do talk about gap analysis a lot, don't we? But whenever you mention requirements, you have to mention gap analysis.
That's right.
That's a natural thing. This show will soon start to just write itself, literally. We'll just post it to ChatGPT.
Just throw if you throw ChatGPT at our old episodes, they'll come up with all kinds of variations and new song suggestions.
Yeah, maybe it might do a better job with the song suggestions. But here are 275 episodes. What do you think we should talk about? Anyway, so that's the first. So we've identified business needs, which is pretty much what we do whenever we get out of bed in the morning. What do we do next?
Develop new processes. So this is one of the things, and this used to be a bugaboo of mine. Having worked at a couple of companies which were sort of around, technology that was about implementing and improving processes, is that anytime you implement a new technology, you're changing the process, you're changing the way work gets done. And sometimes the process change can be the biggest impact, and the technology is just the enabler. So, kind of when you're doing as you're trying to execute on step number one, or a soft skill number one, it's like when you're talking to customers, try to identify, who is the customer of the process, who's getting the end result, and also who owns the process that we're trying to execute. So if you think about a creative service process, it's like the end customer are the people within the organization that are putting in requests for, having, web pages and, brochures and stuff done. But who owns the process of making sure that happens? Well, that's going to be a different person. And you got to talk to both sides. And the customer will let you know whether the process is producing satisfactory results or not, and what they expect. And the process owner is going to tell you about how they do it today. They may tell you about, here's some ideas I have for how we could improve it. But what you really want to do is take all this input, and you want to chart out pictures of the steps and what are the technologies and dependencies and the users in each one of those steps. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why people particularly in marketing, kind of refrain from this. This sounds like a Six Sigma, exercise, but really it's just keep it simple. Like do it in PowerPoint or in Visio or something. Just kind of map things out or on a whiteboard. And the problem is if you skip this step, is that you're not going to see what the dependencies are on being able to execute a good process, and so you may have skipped something that needs to be part of your technology requirements, whether from the business side or from the technical side. And and then it could be that you also may miss a way that data needs to integrate with whatever you're trying to implement, which will be another problem to solve in the implementation.
Yeah, and so and I also think that the change is such a big topic, and it's a thing that I talk about as well, because I think it's a good lesson for us that are selling B2B technology. Right, you're selling change. And of course, everybody loves change except when it happens to them. So
yes,
and that's, I also think why do nothing is such a big competitor for sellers, isn't it? Because you've got this friction. It's not just implementing a new process, a new product, as you say, or new technology, as you say. It's implementing a different way of working, and often, right. When there's a request for technology as a marketing leader, like a CMO like myself, or the marketing ops leadership positions that you've had, when somebody comes to you and says, I need a new technology, it's actually you might need a better process or a different process. So it's going back into it, isn't it? And seeing if it's actually the technology that's needed or whether it's the process that needs to change.
And the thing is, once you get good at thinking about process, you realize it's not that hard to figure out how a process currently works and how you'd want it to work and where the issues are. So it is more of an exercise that you get better with at times. So this is one I really advise people in technical positions and marketing ops that don't skip this step.
Yeah, absolutely, and. So we've got our requirements and our gap analysis, and we're braced for change, and we're understanding this change. So what do we do next?
Developing new skills. So get back when I was talking about business requirements and kind of like walking through things, and even when you're walking through the process, it's like, well, who touches this this process, and what are their competencies? And you want to make sure that this is kind of beyond the idea of the fact that we got to actually teach people. We're going to implement a new system, so we got a new content management system, so we need to teach people how to use it. Well, that's usually the how to get logged in, how to execute particular tasks. But you're really trying to get into what is it that from a skills perspective that we really need to make sure that the staff has. And I know people who very appropriately, when they say, we need to, go implement a new ABM platform, and they say, well, but we don't even have anybody who understands what account-based marketing is all about. So shouldn't we get those people before we actually implement the new system? Or, you buy a customer data platform, but the team doesn't know how to use data for, for what you're hoping the result's going to be. So in addition to figuring out how you're going to get this thing to go live by people understanding how to open up and use the system, create an enablement plan that it kind of addresses those skills, and talk to clients, every day who have systems, that are, sort of suffering from a lack of adoption. Because this is kind of the other issue is that, you're been told to go out and buy something new, but you already have something that hasn't been used well because the lack of adoption, and that lack of adoption could be because you haven't properly funded training or enablement. And so the issue with this is, if you skip this step, then you're going to miss an opportunity in terms of achieving your goals, because you're going to buy something, you're going to implement it, and then people are going to be like, well, what do we do with this? And I don't, I'm not sure I understand the value, let alone what I'm supposed to be doing with it, because I don't really have the skills to take advantage of it.
Yeah, but that's a nice thing about this advice that you're giving here, because I think number one is where you're going to capture a lot of that, right? Is having that conversation is going to uncover whether the organizational readiness for this change is, because if you ask people for a business need rather than, we need a CDP. Well, why?
Yeah.
Well, everybody has a CDP. We need a CDP. I've seen a shiny CDP. I went to a show. Somebody said CDP. I've been reading about CDPs. What do you need a CDP for? What are you going to do with it?
What does CDP mean?
Exactly. So I think that that's we'll unify all of our customer data. Well, what are you going to use unified customer data? And I think That point that you made, number one, about business needs, and I know we harp on about business needs and sort of took the piss out of ourselves, but I think that if you start having that conversation internally, you start having these other conversations about skills and stuff at that point as well, don't you? And the other point now, and I feel like I'm playing the role of the sales side going into an organization with this, is your point there about client, the people who are systems that suffer because of a lack of adoption. And I think that's the biggest killer for your solution. And nowadays that we're all in B2B SaaS, it's beholden on the vendor to make sure that their product is used. I mean, I won't name names, but I've actually, how do I phrase this? There have been products within a suite of products where the customer service and sales team didn't want to talk to the customer because they thought the customer didn't actually know they had the solution and was just paying their dues. And they thought if they said, hey, you don't seem to have logged on, they'd go, oh, no, you're right, cancel. So that adoption thing is interesting. But I think lack of adoption is the cancer that kills from the inside your implementation.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes, not
what a metaphor.
Nice. Yeah,
I shouldn't
have gone there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I have a distinct memory of a company that we were doing, a very large company that we were doing a tech assessment for as a consulting gig, and they, one of their biggest challenges was the inability to find, digital assets.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they just happened to have one of the leading digital asset management solutions, but nobody was using it because the team that acquired it was basically laid off. So the muscle memory for how to use it well was gone. Yeah. And it's like, well, if this is one of your top priorities is finding assets, and you've actually got the tool. So now the gap is the enablement gap. It's not getting into tool. And you could say, well, the tool didn't work for us or whatever. And it's like, well, okay, you're probably not going to go out and buy a new digital asset management solution in the next 6 months. So, maybe address the enablement or understand the skills gap first before you decide to trash the old one and get a new one.
Well, yeah. And I've, when I was in pre-sales years and years and years ago, I remember selling to a client and we knew who the incumbent was. And I'd actually previously worked for the incumbent. And the users were adamant that the solution couldn't do certain things for them. And I knew full well that the solution could do. I mean, obviously I failed to mention that in the sales process. But, you get the,
it does get touchy.
but the users can, but that's, I'm not going to sell I'm on the other side of the fence then, right? I'm not going to sell the opposition, but the interesting thing there is that, and I think cancer was a bit of a wild metaphor to go for immediately, or analogy, but user dissatisfaction can create change in an organization because it ripples up, and no manager wants their people to be dissatisfied. So then they become a sponsor of change. Then they take it to their manager, and it's like, this solution doesn't do what I need to, and this is why our team are badly performing. And it's like you say, they just don't know how to use the system. But nobody comes back and says, well, that's because you don't know how to use the system, do they? Anyway, so, but there was another point I wanted to make about this as well, was the fact that, and again, sort of rolling back to the previous points that you were making, because I think that the competences and experience you have on the team sort of are driven out of that sort of requirements and that change environment you were talking about too, wasn't it? Because we can't pick platforms just because the CMO came in and loves HubSpot and hates Salesforce or whatever. You'd pick the right tool for the job, but
that would never happen.
But it's a consideration of what skills you've got in your group, because that'll just grease the wheels of the implementation, won't it? So so cool. So we've got our requirements. We're braced for change. We have the skills. What do we need to look at now?
Well, we need to. So I think we've talked about change with the previous three. So now we're up to managing change.
Okay.
And so this is. This is a tough one, and this is one, as I remember in my Forrester advisory days. It's like, okay, change management. Yeah, I get it. Blah blah blah. But it is, I mean, this is probably the hardest of the soft skills, because you're acquiring technology to improve the organization's capabilities. Okay, so but why are you making the change, and how can we affect everyone in a value change, letting everyone know that the change is critical? So you need to, as you're sort of thinking about the implementation process going forward, appoint leaders within the organization who could be advocates because they understand the business objectives. This is why we made this investment, right? So make them, they can be credible communicators as to why the change is necessary, and actually build a communications plan that, is kind of a sub plan to your implementation plan, but it's about, how are we going to reach out to the various audiences to kind of have a reinforcing message about this is why we do this. This is how the change is going to happen. And this is how we're going to make sure you're up to speed, whether we need to, take you through training or, whatever those elements are. And then be clear about when the system is going to go live, when old systems will be sunsetted. And sometimes going live means, you've turned it on. But turning it on does not necessarily mean it's available and usable by everyone who's intended to be a user of the system. So you want to know that date as well. It's like, so we're going live on this date. It's going to pilot with this group. We're sunsetting old systems at this date, and at that point, everybody within the organization will be able to have access and use it because they've been trained. And if you skip this, then users become unclear as to what the change means for them. So how am I going to be impacted? What do I need to do? How am I going to get on board? And how do I know whether this thing is supposed to provide value for me or not?
So it pulls at the threads, as you said, about those last three requirements, right? And it kind of goes back to the expression that I was using earlier, that everyone loves change except when it happens to them. And I think that the nice thing about what you're recommending here with the previous three steps is if you follow that, if you do all of these things, you're easing everybody into this change anyway, right? None of this should be a surprise at this point because you've already reached out to them to get their business requirements. You've also had a chat with them about, where their skills sit and all this kind of stuff. And they're like, oh, we know something's going to change. So I think that's good. But I do think it's underestimated how much effort the feeding and watering of a new system is.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
We seem to think, and often vendors' case studies read like this, right? There was a problem, vendor solution was implemented. The world was a better place. Well,
voila!
Yeah.
My God, sales doubled.
Yeah, but there was a lot of the road was probably pretty rocky along that period, and that's the thing that we as organizations need to be prepared for, marketing ops leaders, right? And it is typically falling to marketing operations, right? They need to have those resources in place so they can manage the change, manage the enablement and all that good stuff, because it isn't going to be, oh, well, we've turned it on now. Everything's okay, right?
Oh, you didn't hear about this?
Yeah.
And the other thing to note is that I mean, obviously, if you're implementing something that is impacting everybody in an organization, or not everybody, but you're part of the organization, like a CRM system, it's like that is a major change management effort.
Yeah,
implementing a social media, monitoring or PR tool is going to be it's just a different kettle of fish, smaller group, smaller set of impact, and not that you don't want to go through the steps and understand the communication plan you need to build, the training plan, et cetera, et cetera. But it's we don't want to make this step seem too scary because again, it's going to scale up and down based on the technology you're implementing.
Well, the other thing I think is that if you are cognizant of these 5 steps that you're going to outline here at the beginning of the project, then you're prepared for those kinds of objections. It's like, I had a conversation with a sales leader the other day, as a small company who's scaling up and all this kind of stuff, and they'd reached for a particular CRM at a particular point in their life scale, and his selective memory was like, should we have gone for that? And did we spend a lot of time implementing it? And should we have gone through that pain? And you think, well, yeah, look, here are the reasons why you went through it. This is where you are today. This is where you were at the beginning. And so you can do that. Whereas I think that, as to your point about, these objections are going to surface at some point. And it may be that if they surface retrospectively, somebody's going to be saying, what the fuck did you do? Right. Whereas you want to be, you want to be ready for all of that, don't you?
You want to be ahead of the WTF.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a nicer way of putting it. But also I was thinking about the managing the change as well, is that particularly with new sort of B2B SaaS products and the ability that people can sort of stick them on their credit card and all that kind of good stuff, the role of admin and super users and
yes, absolutely.
That's much more vague than it used to be, right? So you're going to have super users who aren't in marketing operations. You're going to have people that have got some kind of technical responsibility that aren't in IT. So you need to be really careful about where those admin roles are, because that can really screw things up as well. If somebody leaves, or if there's a reorg change or something like that, and suddenly you're dependent on just a few people.
Yeah, and actually, if I don't know if we ever covered change management in and of itself before, because if we haven't, that might be a.
The listener's excited now.
Oh my god!
A whole episode on change management. Don't tell me you'll do requirements and then a gap analysis.
That's right.
All right. So, and we better crack on this. So, looking at the time, so we've got our requirements. We've figured out our change. We have the skills. We're now making a change. What's the fifth?
Measuring success. Because tech implementations and change managements are not. I mean, you don't get into the regular practice of saying, this is how it went, and we're reporting back. I mean, it's like the sort of the muscle memory people have running campaigns of like, yes, we executed. These are the results. This is how we're impacting, the lead flow, blah blah blah. But it's really important, because if you've built a business case, you've interviewed all these people, you're implementing the technology, and then I think you just referred to an example where it's like, well, was that really worth it? Why did we do that? Blah blah blah. Yeah. And so to be able to go, to be able to determine kind of like, well, this is the baseline metrics that when we decide we had a problem, this is kind of what the issues were. Our delivery times, our web engagement, our conversions, blah blah blah. So we need to. Now that we're implementing the new technology, we need to set expectations for when we can actually start reporting on changes in the performance results. So we can say, we implemented this date. Okay, everyone's up to speed. Now we're starting to see, the fruits of our labor, and we're going to do sort of periodic updates just to prove, we're good stewards of using the company's, resources. We're going to do updates to show that we're actually the reason we implemented this is proving out, successfully. Or if it's not, then, what are the things we're going to do to make sure we account for that and make sure that this thing is back on track. And this is certainly not necessarily the most difficult part of this whole 5 soft skills, but it certainly is one that it's important, because if you want to have a reputation as being a good user of the company's resources, and you want to get the next investment funded, it's good to show that the last investment actually paid off.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, again, I'm not suggesting that our podcast has turned formulaic, but it is like, figure out, is something that we really do need to reinforce, is that it's often that we'll just go boldly into something and not think about, you have to do that baseline, because somebody will ask you, however big or small the project is should we have done that? And that WTF moment you were just talking about. And I think doing this early in the process is what it's all about, isn't it? And so when you're defining those business needs, well, what does success look like if we solve that business need? And then we can show them the before and after, can't we? And I also think if it's a big technology shift, we should be doing POCs and stuff like that to prove these small, small changes. And
absolutely, you want to have the ammunition for when there's somebody who's trying to be the naysayer on the executive team. So, why did we do that? Why did we invest that? You're really going to give them money again to blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, and also people are really good at post-rationalizing or post whatever the opposite to rationalizing is, aren't they? And going through stuff. All right. So our conclusion. Who's doing the conclusion?
I could do the conclusion. Because I think one of the things that's important about this is that business leaders, know that the soft stuff is hard as well. I mean, they know that dealing with change management, upskilling staff, changing processes, it's like you think about, changing out the sales team because you need to get different skills. I mean, it's hard. And so they should, respect the fact that you're going through these things to implement technology. So it is a way of earning respect.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe.
Being upfront about this is why we're doing these steps, and executing on them is, should leave you with a good reputation.
I like it. Yeah. So just a reminder, they're not really steps, are they? 5 soft skills, aren't they? So gathering requirements, planning for change, making sure you've got the skills, making the change, managing it, and measuring success. So thank you, Jeff, which leaves us with the last agenda item, the song. And it's your choice this week. What are we going for?
We're going back in time to to one of my favorite quirky groups from the 80s, Devo. They had a song called Soft Things. And the line in there that I enjoyed pulling out was, and now I'm calling out for soft things, something soft when times get hard.
Splendid. Yeah, the only we were talking before, the Devo song I'm most familiar with is Whip It, but that wouldn't have worked here. So Soft Things is going to be.
I'm not sure where this hit on the charts, but
well, we'll find out. So I'll play out Soft Things by Devo from 1981, and will I see you in the studio next week?
Yes.
Good show, man. I'll see you then.
Okay.
Cheers, buddy.
Something you need, something you'll get, something you register emotion, you get a helpful hint. There's a certain way it shivers when she shakes.
Thank you, Jeff. And that was a teeny bit of Soft Things by Devo. Next week we'll be chatting about the CMO's role in the customer experience. Please get in touch if there's something you'd like me to cover with Jeff. You know where to find me, Ian at rockstarcmo.com, or look for me on LinkedIn. So that's a wrap on episode 271 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Thanks to Jeff for his insight, and to you for putting your dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and driving along with us. I've been your host, Ian Truscott, and you can find links to me, Jeff, and all the things we refer to there in the show notes on rockstarcmo.com, where you can also find our blog, newsletter, and all of our previous episodes. We'd love to hear from you, so please reach out via the website or LinkedIn. Just search Rockstar CMO. I'm sure you'll find us, but please mention that you're a listener if you'd like to connect. The next episode of The Rose and Rockstar with Robert Rose will drop on Saturday. It's something a bit meta this week, as we'll be discussing podcasting, and Jeff and I will be back next week in the studio. I hope you can join us for both of those here on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.